people come to watch the crystal and always until come. I watch a few balls just to amuse myself.
Do you get tired of it?
No, it's just addicted to it.
I'll do it. Yeah. Are you being happy? Yeah.
You're running. Right up there on the big bench.
Lots of interruptions during the day, especially if I want to play, which I like to do a lot, as possible, I get to get up of it. Playing around with the finding out I think amusing myself in a way, you're learning what that, and those kind of things, those issues will often go into the music.
Can we borrow this for a while?
Well, actually it's I can't remember what the name is.
Log in. So what to do in this case?
Tune them to particular shape and make, tops and bottoms for the stage. But as well as that, I also do a few extra, just in case at this time now, I like to have a sort of like a vocabulary of different I might use that one. Yeah, so sitting up there, sitting up, well, we should just take some. And it's only until I come to the firing I realise so you've got to watch that you get it into it and try and turn the fire. Anyway, that's good enough for now. Having a turntable just makes things a lot easier.
It's 2 o'clock, by the way.
All right, well, to be continued. Is that all right? Is that all right if we go over to the thing? I'll just put the plastic over there and I'll continue.
The trouble with the stoneware glazes are that they contain trace elements of, iron and things like that, and it bleeds into the glaze, so it alters the colour, and you tend to get the iron, so you may get greens or golds, mostly golds, because you don't do construction much.
That scares a bit of kidding.
Put one in your pocket.
Like a spoon. I put it on the table and I thought it was a dangerous thing to do.
Oh, you should give long to yes, you better keep it in your pocket.
We'll get this.
Right, now, so we are going to do it in porcelain or 80, what is it? SC80. And porcelain is usually best. It's the brightness of the clay behind which glistens through the glaze, which is a big hill. And the other one sort of dulls it down a bit. Now, I want you to make small pots because we've got a little kiln, and anyway, what's the use of making a big pot if you're going to throw it in the rubbish bin when you get it out? Everything is fairly experimental. We don't know anything about the kiln. It looks to me as though it will go up to 1280 with no trouble. It's got good solid elements in it. We're not sure of its rate of rise because at the moment the kiln is saturated with water, and you'll notice that we've got it on out there and it's steaming like a chimney. So we can't really tell now just what its rate of rise is, so how long it takes. Anyway, I'll talk more to you about firing cycle later. Now, the glaze recipe, it's quite strange. You know that most glazes, they more or less have a definite sort of, you've got to have so much of this, that and that, and if you go above it, you throw the glaze out a filter, and it doesn't work. Well, this glaze is completely thrown out of filter. Most of your glazes, you have an alumina-silica ratio. If you want a matte glaze, it's about 1 to 4 or something like that. 1 to alumina to 1 to 4. If you want a satin matte, it's about 1 to 7. And if you want a shiny glaze, it's about 1 to 10. Well, these glazes are alumina ratio about 1 to 15 or 16. You don't want much clay. You want very little alumina in your glaze recipes at all. So this means, of course, the result is that your glaze is very fluid. You haven't any stabilising material in your glaze, so it tends to just run off the top. So that's why we have these little things to catch the drips that come off. Now, I have to work this out. These glazes are zinc-based, they're called zinc silicate. And therefore, we're going to divide the ingredients up into percentages. And I'll give you the percentages, and it's from there that you can work out a glaze recipe. Now, being zinc, they're high in zinc, so you need a zinc roughly from about, you can experiment, you see, 18 to 25, 26%, somewhere about there. And then you use feldspar or Neff. Neff's quite good because it's got quite a lot more complex. NEP or feldspar, either. Probably soda's better, but potash is perfectly alright. And you need about between 20 and 30% of that.
God, so you say feldspar and nickel sandwich?
Yes, one or the other. And then you need silica from about, the lowest would be about 20 up to about 40. Now the silica tends to stiffen the glaze a little bit, so if you have less silica, your glaze is going to be more running. Now, what have I got up to now? Somewhere. And then your fluxes. whatever percentage you've made, you fill the rest up with silicone. Be up to 50%, even 60%, or down to about 40%. Should be somewhere about that. How does that add up to come to 100? I mean, it's all fairly rough, is it? Roughly 100? Yes. Well, when you're making up your glaze recipe, for the sake of convenience, make it up to 100. Fiddle these around so that you can make it up to the answer is 100. Now, your fluxes, you will need, let me think, how can I explain it? You can experiment with different fluxes. You know what the fluxes are, don't you? There's calcium, magnesium, barium, lithium. Any others? We've got zinc as a separate one. Must be, come on, must be others. Anyway, potassium and sodium as well, but you'll get those in the feldspar. And they're very, very awkward. You can add, if you feel you want more sodium, you can add soda ash, or if you want more potassium, you can use pearl ash. The only thing to remember is that these things are water soluble, and they tend to upset a glaze a little bit, because what happens, you have it in your recipe, soluble in the water. You put your pot in, and the water goes into your pot, and along goes the sodium with it as well, or the potassium in its soluble form. So it becomes withdrawn from the glaze. And if you're doing some firings, you know, it comes out again and it's okay. It seems to work. Calcium, yeah, they're all about the same actually. You can muddle them up. Lithium, yes, 2, 4, 6 is fairly high, I think. 2 to 4 probably. It's a very flux. Makes things flux very well. What other ones do we have? Magnesium. I don't know about magnesium. I haven't really used it. That was I think be about the same. Anyway, we'll make a mixture of them.
I can't add up to 100, yeah. I can't add up to 100.
You'll have to, yeah, we'll have to increase it.
So increase the flux past 6%.
Well, you say you're working out how to
What?
Yes.
2 to 6% of your mix, of your total mix.
No, but each of those should be 2 to 6%, but even if we have all 4 of them and add them at 6% each, it only makes 24%.
Yeah, but you mean
And then you can
Okay,
get the edge.
yeah, that's okay. I told you wrongly. It's the Fritz that you use up. The Fritz recipe which has 50% in.
It would replace the silicon, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So
But
the flux is
I would use up to I'd use about 10% Fritz.
what about
Flux, dirty borate if you like, or bonex. Makes up about again about 3 units in your glaze. You know, some celadon glazes and things like that. Yeah, it's boric oxide. And so,
Bone acts the same way.
no, it's better than coal. Quite expensive. You just have to work these out, and you'll find some work better than others. That's why I want you all to do a recipe, so that we might get some exciting glazes and we might not.
So you mix up your 100% and then add dirty borate as an extra.
And also you can add titanium. And titanium is a pacifier, and you can add 2 to 6% of that afterwards too. So that comes on top of your 100. And I've bought copper carbonate, and we'll add that. And that comes after 2.
How many percent?
Well, you can do 1 to 3. Sort of thick, you can experiment.
That one you've got over there with the green crystal, that's a particular.
If you like, see what happens.
And so
Quite often, soda ash is a flux, yes. And so is pearl ash. Pearl ash goes like a rock. you get, of course, you get sodium in soda feldspar, which may eliminate your needing to use soda ash, and you get pearl ash in potash feldspar, it's potassium. So that those two fluxes are already in your feldspar, and I think that NET has both in it. And into the saucer, that's why we have these little saucers. And you seem to have to get that fluidity to get the crystals. So that's why it's fairly difficult on these flat surfaces to get the crystals, because there isn't enough movement of the glaze. So you really want some sort of movement. So even if you're making a bowl, they do seem to form on the flat ones, but if it's just slightly up, it seems to be better. If you've got a bowl which is too dished, it runs down and you get a pool in the centre of glaze. And this sort of withdraws from the edge so that the edge is paler and it comes in. It can be good, but usually for some reason or other it's not.
You get a clutter of crystals in the middle.
Yes, and the crystals in the middle tend to be small, and sometimes they look scummy. And the other thing you can do is you can bore a hole in your bowl, and you set it up on one of these, and the glaze runs through into the interior of this. So you have to have a little hole here, so just round there, so that it runs out from there into there. And it's quite, that's the part I don't like doing much, but if you're making a steepish side bowl, I made a tiny one out there for us to experiment with, just to show you how it goes. So, and I thought it'd be quite nice if you make a flat one, not too big, something like that without that, about that size. And we'll have a shelf of flat ones. The biggest trouble is we're going to have all these things, and we really want to be as economical with the kiln as possible, so that once you get a pot, on top of that, it'll be about that much. So it'll probably be about that much between the shelf. But if we can do a row of little dishes, we can get them in small. We won't glaze the outside, we won't put a hole in them, and you'll just glaze the inside, and we'll be able to have one sort of narrow or two narrow shelves. And the shelves out there look pretty thick too, just to take up lots over. And so if you'd like to do that, just perhaps each make a couple of small dishes, and that'll be quite nice.
Flora, they need those little stands.
So now, any more questions?
What sort of atmosphere do you strawberries in your?
You reduce the temperature quickly to 1100 degrees.
Sorry, when you get up to 1200.
When you get up to 1280,
1280.
that's top temperature. You reduce it to 1100.
So do you do that by sort of blowing some cold air in, or?
I've tried that.
Open the lid and wait.
Yeah, the trouble is, if you open the lid, you might never get it shut again. That's what I did. The first time I was doing it, it was a kiln at Pinehaven, and I opened it up, and then I couldn't get the thing shut again.
It's too hot.
And I had people standing on it and all sorts of things, trying to get it down. You see, everything expands in the kiln, and it's really held under a pressure.
Yes.
And when you open the lid, of course, it just sort of goes whoop, and it just doesn't fit back again. It would be all right if we had something, I suppose, black against it.
Perhaps you could just.
So I never dared do it with any other kiln, and like the brick kiln, it was like a domino effect through the kiln.
So how do you actually?
They just stuck everywhere. I tried it again by having it blowing onto a brick.
Yeah.
But I did notice that the pots that were really nearest the kiln, or nearest the opening, had very, very small crystals. I haven't,
Near the draft.
Well,
They might
yeah,
have
when
got
we were
down
getting the draft, the crystals were small, and the back side of the pot, the crystals were bigger, but the if you haven't got a pyrometer, you really, no, I don't think you can do it without a pyrometer.
Because your cones would fall down
Your
the way.
cones go at
Yeah.
over at your temperatures, but then you can't, there's no way of telling when you've got back except by really looking at the colour and getting the colour. So I think you need a pyrometer. I really do. The pyrometer, some I've seen, you know, some of those that will turn off and turn on. There are wonderful pyrometers about now.
You mean with the thermostat on?
Yeah, with the thermostat, but
switch back on again.
you can set it and it'll stay for as long as you like and then switch yourself off and all sorts of, well, I haven't got anything wonderful like that. So you have to watch it, but if you've got one that switches off, you can get it up to 1280 and it'll switch itself off. That's quite handy because then, you know, it can start to come down before you...
Actually, they come down more quickly, the top temperature, when they do that one further down.
It doesn't take terribly long. The books say, you know, you should get it down in 10 minutes, but I've never done that. So you'd have to open doors and things, and I think it's quite ridiculous. And I'm not too sure that it's not all just talk anyway, from what I can see. It doesn't seem to make much difference whether it takes 20 minutes or 40. Doesn't seem to be anything wrong. And then hold it at 1100 or a little bit below or a little bit above, just round about 1100 for anything from 2 to 4 hours. That is quite good. And sometimes I leave it 4 hours. Doesn't seem to make much difference. So, and then you switch it off. And then, when you open them up and take them out, you will probably find, you see, that these are stuck. And this is where, you know, you really do have a lot of trouble. And I suppose I'm not a terribly careful person. And I expect that that's partly that. If you're very, very particular, you probably have greater luck, you know, not luck, but greater results. But I tend to find that they do, you put a wash of alumina between your pot and this, so that the idea is that they should not really stick. And quite often they don't, and you get them off. But sometimes a corner will stick, and as it comes off, you know, it'll chip the jolly bowl. And it's done for. Sometimes it rolls off on quite unattractive ways, and then you've got to start trying to grind it and polish it down, and it's quite a long business. So that there is a loss rate of and then there's another great amount of pots which aren't perfect, and then there are a few which you're quite pleased with. You don't have to use as much. But cobalt oxide, I have blue, but about 1 to 1.5, and if you can tone it down with a bit of iron. I think the iron...
What about if you add titanium to it, that would perhaps...
Oops, whose pot am I ruining?
Okay, I think I'm going to throw that one away as I look at it here. I don't like the shape.
Turn it round that way.
No,
It'll look
throw
better.
it away.
The titanium affects the crystals. They seem to change. It's quite interesting, and it makes it a bit opaquer. It depends a bit on the recipe too. The recipe I'm going to give you, which is a fruit recipe, which I'll give you tomorrow, because I've brought the fruit up with me, so we can do that, and it should definitely work. When I put titanium in with that, it was just so different. You know, it sort of broke them up quite differently. And then something, you know, you open the kiln the next time and you think you know what's going to come out, and it's quite different. And I can't always say why it does it. I mean, I can't say why it does it. And I've tried by, you know, making the same pots and putting the same glaze on them and then firing them in different firings, and they never look the same. So
That's the magic sometimes.
Just don't know why.
It's like working with yeast or something, you're working with almost a living thing that's doing something of its own in there.
Yes, and it must be something, you know, perhaps if it's a wet day or a windy day it makes a difference, even though it's a leaf cool. I don't know.
What about the thickness of glaze would make a difference too,
The
wouldn't it?
thickness of the glaze makes a difference. You need your glaze reasonably thick, but we'll go into that when we're putting it on. Just in them or on them. They call that background colour the matrix, and you can get quite different colours between the matrix, that's the background colour, and the crystals. Sometimes cobalt that tends to come out. Yes, and you'll find the background's green, and I've used copper and manganese, and that tends to, the background tends to be different, sort of browny crystals on green, something like that, so that you can get a big variation.
And is that always copper carbonate or copper oxide?
I have always used the carbonates, but I can see no reason why you shouldn't use the oxides. I don't think it matters at all. I think I've
Use less.
yes, use less. I've used the carbonates because they're ground finer, and I thought they'd mix up fine.
Would you think it be necessary to make a saucer for that? Or would the juice, you know, from your press with the glaze will go underneath the pot?
But probably just hang in big drips which may drip off. It would be perfectly right, I think I would put it on just a slab of clay. It was probably here, I think just put a little edge.
Would it run in under the lid? That's the other thing you worry about.
The lid is your problem. You may want, you could either fire your lid separately, or you could just put the crystal. I've made boxes, but I've just put the crystals on the top, and then had another glaze on the side.
In a group or something.
In the movement, you know how top move in the coil. If it tipples over, and to have another sort of coil in the middle, what problem? No, not at all.
Still do that.
Yeah. You might suddenly find it this one off the later. You've got to go accumulate.
You are at home, and so it is actually good when little things go wrong, because we can learn from that. With your stencil here, it's very important when it has been washed out and it is blotting it off with the newspaper to get all the moisture out of the image area. Because if you can have a look, yeah, can you see very fine little, traces of film in there and there? That is the moisture from washing out, and there's a sort of a trace element of the stencil film is still in the moisture, and although it looks very thin, it will actually blocks the ink from printing. We can eliminate that by using the chemical that you remove the stencil with, and use that very delicately in the image area, just to remove that sort of trace.
With the brush.
No, drawing was actually drawn on a transparent film, like we were discussing permatrace. Yeah. Fun? Yes, yeah. When you draw with ink, it looks very dark when you actually use the ink pen and on the white paper underneath the transparent material. But that is not an indication that it is dense. It might look black, but it is not actually opaque. So you have to hold it up against the light and make sure it is completely opaque. Because there are some fine lines here, not because they were fine that they filled in, but it was because there wasn't enough density in the black. It was sort of grey, and the ultraviolet light still manage to get through it, somehow. The chemical to remove the stencil, because it is only a very thin film in there, but you do take a bit of a risk that you get more out of it than you intended to. Additional, you print, you repeat them every stencil for every color. You make sure that almost put those on first before you do accurate way. For a hand cut stencil, it is very hard to actually cut a double line, in across. So what you do on your print there, and that make sure that you lift up.
If you design, if you work off those points all the time, and work accurately, there's no reason why your registration should be out of order.
And you
Does
only
everyone understand that this, although it's printed on here, this was a run of about 100. Okay, you only print, say, 2 copies of this with the registration mark open, and then you just take it up on the back for the rest of the run, because once the first one's registered, you mark it with tape, so you know the exact position of the paper each time, and you only need a couple to refer to re-register the next piece. So you waste 2 prints a long run. And then they're covered up and they won't be printing on any others except the ones you're using to register forms.
4 or 5 or 6 or something on, but it doesn't make any difference. Once you get 2 right, well, everything else has to be right. It doesn't matter how many more you put on, it doesn't make any difference. So 2, and as far apart as possible. It wouldn't do anything if you put register marks that far apart from one another, because just a fraction out and the whole print could be quite. So as far as possible apart, but still, of course, in the area of your paper you're printing on.
One more point there is those register marks are really too close to the design.
Yes.
As a general rule, it's better to have them below, because that's where you'll be citing them rather than having to look out them under your screen and citing them at the top. So it's better to have them below your print, not at the sides either, because that will lift your squeegee slightly. Just the thickness of that tape with the squeegee running across it will just lift your squeegee enough to actually alter your print, especially if it's very close to your printing image. Whereas at the bottom you've already done your print.
Because the slightest nick in it, and you will have to do a lot of hard work with sandpaper to actually polish the squeegee back to working order again. And the first time you will get that, and you actually have to recover it again. The next time you will think twice. You learn fast. That very often is spoiled by when you use the sandpaper to put more pressure on one particular end, and you could end up with a squeegee that goes around, or you put too much there or too much there. So it is you have to have it firm, a firm contact, and lightly. Don't put pressure on it, because you're actually bending the rubber. So very light action like this, and the other way around. Make sure that the slope of the squeegee, there's a slight angle. I will explain in a minute, but get that same angle there, and just let it lightly go. So it will give a very sharp edge all the way along here.
That's slightly beveled.
Yeah, it is. I show you on the board. In most cases, you will get sort of slightly, that is the squeegee and this is the rubber, and you actually print this edge here, and so you have the ink in front of it here, and that actually pulls it across the silk. Yeah. In cases where you want a thick deposit of ink, and it's very often with fabric, where you use a metallic ink on fabric, where you really want a good deposit, and I've got a good example of it there. You use a squeegee that is slightly rounded. That will really give a good solid, solid deposit. And where you have got a print on an embossed surface, like perhaps leather or something, or where where the surface is not completely flat, you use a squeegee with a point. It makes sense because that way you can follow the contour of the surface you are printing on.
Would that be with the paper you use to put sandpaper underneath to draw on?
No, that is more for photographic effect with the sandpaper on the paper. Now that is for very heavy embossed paper, not for the sort of textured paper. That's okay. You can use this, but when you get an they call it sort of leather embossed, sort of that is very difficult, because when you have the surface of the paper and it sort of has got the squeegee will sort of go over it, and you get white lines in your solid areas where you want to print. But if you have the squeegee more sort of pointed, it will actually go in those areas and give you a better image. Alright, put it down there so you get ink there, and the next time you put a bit of paper on the top of it, and so it is good to be able to keep the ink here behind the squeegee and hook it over the side, and then you can lift it up, and your ink is stopped from running all over your image area, and your squeegee is out of the way, and the next time you start painting, you pick it up again, and away you go. And you can see how much ink is left on the silk. The rubber actually bends, and you will actually bend it, you see? You bend it down. It is a pressure in the same angle as your squeegee. It sounds all very complicated, but after a while you do it automatically, and you don't think about it. But you have to get that feeling, and it's something that I can't sort of tell you, but you have to experience it. And to make life easier, leave yourself enough space here and on the top for the ink. Because if the ink starts running over your image area, the next print you make, you will get a blob there. Sharp edges, because sooner or later you put the thing half on, and you have used them quite a bit, and they start to look like this. Don't persevere, make a new one on it. Don't tape them up and tape them up. make a new one.
Is this a handmade thing? Is it half a pipe or
Yes,
what?
yes, exactly. It is just a polythene, the black piping with a section cut out and rounded off corners and 3 screws, and it's ideal.
Can we make that?
Yeah. There's just a bit of pipe.
Any lengths you like.
You can.
Give in.
If you varnished it, perhaps when you
Yeah.
first got it, it would be a good
I've
idea.
got one.
Yes. Varnish would help.
Yeah,
Yeah.
those from CCG.
Yeah.
That brings me to a point of CCG. If anybody wants to order something, let us know, and we can order it. The orders are usually, so if anybody wants to order something, let us know, and we will go.
We'd have to get the colours too.
Well, I've got all those
From CCG.
Oh, last year?
Yeah. Your craft, your products, and so on, and I think they have.
I
they
see, like
have,
batik
yeah,
and
yes,
stuff,
yes.
yes.
They,
Oh, well.
they have. All depends what you're using it for. If you're using it for a few prints for yourself, or you're doing it for a few prints that are going to be sold, and you can recover money from it. And the overall effect that you want to achieve with it. So the ability of multicolor in in the same stencil. This is the black stencil of that particular pattern, but this is going to be printed in two different colors, in yellow and orange, I believe. And those two, because they are quite, separate from one another, can be done in the same stencil. To have those two images, and then block one off, print that one, and then block that one off, and print that one. Or with a slight separation with cardboard in here, and you use two squeegees, one for the yellow and one for the orange, and you can print them at the same time. Or you can use a nice effect by putting red ink here and put yellow ink here and let them blend slightly. So you will get actually a bit of an effect from each color into each ink. But that you will have to have a bigger layout of memory in having your screens. But there's always a drying time anyway between prints. If you have printed your first color, you have to wait until it dries. So that gives you time to make the preparations for your next stencil. And lots of people don't seem to realize that you can, of course, recover. You can make hundreds of different stencils on your one screen if you look after the screen. You can keep going. The older the silk gets, the easier it is to attach photo stencils to them. New silk is not very nice. So look after them. That's important. Well, I won't make the same mistake twice by talking too much. I gave you quite an ear bashing on Sunday.
We haven't seen him.
No. Those around, so you have to pay for that as well.
It's lined. Yeah.
But what I said with that dark, with that sort of solid image there, I feel for a dress like this, it is a little bit sort of out of character, because the rest is so even. Differently for a curtain material, perhaps, where you get this image sort of repeated, over the whole area. But the metallic inks really work very nice on the dark.
I thought it would have been heavy because it looked like velvet, didn't it?
Mm.
Yes, but makes the black look very dense, doesn't it?
I'll be modelling it tomorrow.
Is it your frock?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, congratulations on getting such a lovely gown.
Yeah, no, it is, and that's where silkscreen comes in the boutique type of thing, where you only want a few length of fabric in that particular design and not hundreds and hundreds. And especially when there's very delicate register involved, if you've got your one negative, you say, well, I want those spikes in red, for instance. You opaque everything else with the plum tree, opaque everything out and just leave all those in for the meantime, and then you make a positive, a contact to get your positive. You get your register marks with only those spikes. Then you wipe the opaque off, you opaque those things out and you only leave that wiggly line for your second color. Make a contact of that, so you've got your register marks again with just that wiggly line, and so on. You can go into 10, 15 colors.
What takes it off? Is it water?
Just water,
Yes.
yeah. So you're starting with your same base negative every time, and as long as you make sure that you've got your register marks back on, there's no way that it can be out of register, because this all come from the same negative. And that's the most accurate way of doing it. But that's not always possible, because if you've got colors that are going to overlap, then you have to make separate drawings of each color. And there, where you have to make separate drawings, there the danger comes in if you are not accurate enough that you get slightly misregistered. But doing it this way, if possible, it is the most secure way of getting it exactly fitting. A bit time consuming because you have to wash it off again and let it dry. But it saves a lot of.
You could only do that.
You could do it in an opposite way too. If you make, say, a photo stencil, or you want to have the least, detail in it. Yeah, you make that drawing and you use that same piece of film laser and make your photo stencil, and then so on. You add onto that prints from a lino cut by cutting some more action.
Right.
Some. Yeah, you got it, mate. And that's direct. 60. You haven't got a screen degrees yet, right? Okay. Degreasing is
Well, you hardly need, same with
Well,
this.
that still comes up, don't it?
Yeah, but if you cut it first, you've still got your whole sheet. Now you can have lots of little bits. Especially, it's quite expensive. So if you're buying it yourself, it's as well. You have to have your registration marks on it. So you can't go below that point. But if this was joined onto something else, you'd probably have enough to do another stencil. So keep an eye on
What's that called?
green polyester
Green polyester film.
hand cut stencil. You haven't got a bigger one that you're going to do. Are you printing anything down here besides?
No.
No.
Then
Yep, so you just cut out your stems then, and whatever's going to be green.
now with this tonight, can I cut out those stencils from the drawing? I can't, can I?
This is a different design altogether.
Yeah.
No, I'd say stick to one design at a time.
Yes.
It'll get very complicated.
I know, well, no, for homework, that's what I'm getting at. Oh, tomorrow.
You can take. You've still got stencils to cut out, haven't you?
Only that one.
You're not doing these
Yeah.
as a shade of colour behind.
Well, I want that to be black and white with just a shade there, but I could do that with a tint afterwards, couldn't I?
Oh yeah, why not do the whole thing as a print?
Wouldn't the colour be too heavy?
You can mix a really light shade. But you could almost do that out of the paper stencil. But you could have done also out of the paper stencil, but we're getting you used to doing the... But you could do that block here as a paper stencil with your registration marks. And you could underprint that with a really low, whatever key you like.
Just a shadow.
Just a shadow colour.
And
And the same here.
I only want that and a shadow there. Maybe we can do that. It's
It's
just
up to you, but every one, the colour you want is another stencil.
a paper one, I just cut the paper.
Do a paper one for this. You must have these points in it.
Yes, and that sort of paper, any sort of
The tissue paper. I'll give you some before you go, so you could cut those too.
So I'm going to cut this now.
photo stencil of that, but you have made a photo stencil, so I would suggest you're doing something else with a hand cut stencil this time. You could do on different things, but we will first prepare your screen, the photo stencil, for printing. Yeah, so you will have, it is already blocked out and everything.
Unfortunately, we've got one of the students printing on it.
Alright, I will find it for you.
If you come over during the day,
It's about an hour involved in printing. But actually I've got some for Bonka.
this your colour scheme? Your
Oh,
colour
yeah.
division?
Yeah.